Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Fine Disaster. This is Battlefield 1, and today's weapon review, we're going to be taking a closer look at the M97 Trench Gun Hunter edition. We're going to be covering the stats of the weapon, the base properties, as well as how you can get the most out of this shotgun and how it stacks up to something like the Model 10A Hunter. With that being said, let's get straight into the stats of the weapon. Now, this is a shotgun, meaning interesting damage models in the sense that there's many components that actually determine what damage this gun outputs at what distance. Starting off, of course, with the maximum minimum damage of each individual pellet at 8.4 maximum damage, 4.2 minimum damage. There's nothing surprising here. The damage drop off is pretty severe, but we'll get into that in just a second. What you should also know about this shotgun is that it comes with 15 pellets. Obviously not the highest in the game, nevertheless plenty when it comes to one-shot potential. It also means that you actually can one-shot with this weapon all the way out to 16 meters. At 17 meters, no matter how accurate you are, this is sadly no longer possible. You're only going to be doing your maximum damage to 14 meters, but shouldn't find it too difficult to still get that one-shot kill at 16 meters. Having covered the damage output, then let's move on to the actual fire rate of this weapon. At 138 rounds per minute, it's not a slow firing shotgun, actually faster firing than most people would actually expect. This is something I noticed when I used this weapon. I struggled to actually get to the maximum rate of fire of this weapon simply because for shotguns, or for at least pump action shotguns and the way we're used to playing them, especially given the Model 10A Hunter, you're not used to quite that amount of firepower or firing speed. Having said that, then, muzzle velocity, not important with a shotgun, nevertheless 333 meters per second. What is important for a shotgun is, of course, its magazine size. However, there's no surprises here. At 5, this is pretty much comparable to most shotguns in the game. The reload times of this weapon are relatively normal for shotguns. No surprises here, sadly, either. Now, this is to say that, of course, reload times are a little bit more complicated in Battlefield 1 than previous Battlefield games. Not really for the shotguns. Those things, of course, are similar to what they used to be. You've got a one bullet reload here of about 1.87 seconds, if my math is correct. And if you want to reload all of your bullets, this is, of course, at 5.87 seconds, a little bit more lengthy. You obviously have to reload each cartridge for the shotgun separately. You can, of course, reload the entire magazine as if this were something like the Sega 12K. Moving on then to the recoil of this weapon. Now, shotguns, recoil isn't too important. At least that's what I usually say. As you'll notice a little bit later on in this commentary when we talk a little bit more about playstyle, this isn't necessarily so much the case for this weapon, but the recoil is worth mentioning nevertheless. We've got vertical recoil here of 9, recoil to the left and right of 1.5, and a first shot recoil multiplier of 1, typical for shotguns in Battlefield 1. Last thing, of course, I'd like to mention is spread. No surprises here, as most assault weapons, most shotguns in the game at 0.3. It's good enough for the distances you should be using shotguns. Anyhow, base spread actually usually isn't what stops you from being accurate in Battlefield 1. It's more likely spread that builds up over time, which isn't as much an issue with shotguns as it is, of course, with an automatic weapon. Having discussed the general stats of the weapon, let's move on to how the weapon in practice performs and how you best use this shotgun. Now, this shotgun is to be distinguished from the Model 10A Hunter. That's what I'd like to point out first, because it isn't the same weapon. First of all, it has less pellets, 15 instead of 20. It also has a slightly reduced one-shot kill potential, but we're only talking about 1-2 meters here in practice. But what it also means with lesser pellets is it's lesser forgiving when it comes to aim. Another thing I'd like to point out more generally when using pump action shotguns and aim in Battlefield 1 is that the targeting reticle, that circle you get when hip firing your shotgun, is misleadingly large. You're not going to get a one-shot potential if your target is somewhere within those circles. You really want them dead center. Your spread of your shotgun is a lot tighter than you may think it is given that targeting reticle. With that being said, that's what often holds me back in my shotgun gameplay. Admittedly, I hardly use shotguns. I don't have too much enjoyment using them and find them just to be that little bit too inflexible for most situations. I much prefer some of these standard SMGs for the assault class, the Hellriegel, the Automatico, or the MP18. And with that also comes the element of practice. I believe actually this shotgun probably benefits a little bit more from practice than something like the Model 10A would. And that's because of its high fire rate. Actually using this high fire rate isn't as easy as simply picking up the weapon and triggering through. Well, effectively it is, but you actually have to hit your target. And given that this shotgun has quite a bit of recoil and DICE is right actually balance it in that way, actually you're going to have to engage in something crazy called Recoil Control. Not something you usually have to do in Battlefield 1, at least too much. In this case, you're actually going to have to do that if you want to fire this gun at its maximum fire rate. And given its maximum fire rate and its very similar one-hit potential, if you are an accurate player and a player which can decently control recoil, you're actually going to find that probably this weapon is the best shotgun out there, at least when it comes to the Hunter variants on the pump action shotguns. Now, another thing I'd like to note here is it's not the easiest of shotguns to use to get the maximum potential. If you're just using this shotgun casually, much like the Model 10A Hunter, it'll perform in a relatively similar way. If you want to get to that high fire rate that this shotgun for pump action shotguns can actually achieve, you're going to have to put in a little bit of practice, and that's something I'm still actually doing as we speak. The weapon generally performs well. It performs as you think a pump action shotgun would do, and it performs on the respective game modes and maps you expect it to. Argonne Forest, everybody runs around with a shotgun. Why not, instead of taking the Model 10A Hunter next time, you stick with the M97 Trench Gun Hunter? It'll certainly switch things up. Another thing I'd like to point out with is you shouldn't be using this gun outside of its optimum range. I know this sounds crazy. Why is somebody telling me to not use a shotgun at long range? That's no surprise here. But I too often see people in wide open conquest maps running around with shotguns. They usually just end up dead. I just like to put that out there because I've played Battlefield 1 again today and I've seen people running around with shotguns on maps and places where they're just going to get themselves killed with it. With that being said, what have your experiences been with the M97 Trench Gun Hunter? Is it your favorite shotgun? Is it one of your most frequently used shotguns? Or are you not a shotgun player at all? Or just simply don't enjoy this shotgun specifically? Feel free to leave me that comment and your experiences as well as your future video suggestions for Battlefield 1 down below in the comments. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.